Yes, so we will get started. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. In today's meeting of the Climate Justice Working Group, we are going to continue the process of reviewing the disadvantaged communities criteria for 2025, kind of try to bring that to a close. As we typically try to do here, the meeting should not go over the allotted 2-hour time period. We really want to respect everyone's time. I know this is the end of the day and no one wants to go over time. So we're going to try to keep it to that 2 hours just to benefit everyone's schedule. As for anyone who is observing this meeting, either live or via WebEx, this is a meeting of the Climate Justice Working Group. This is not a public hearing or forum. We will not be taking any testimony from the public during this meeting. If you are attending, we ask that you remain respectful of the proceedings. Please refrain from raising your hand or attempting to draw attention to yourself or interjecting at any point. Oh, sorry. Next slide, please. For any members of the press who have joined us today, either on a WebEx or in person, we will not be taking any questions or making any statements. Please refer any inquiries you have to our press team. That email address is pressoffice@dec.ny.gov. With regards to any questions or comments on the disadvantaged communities criteria, or for any thoughts on the Climate Justice Working Group, you can feel free to send any of those inquiries or suggestions to climatejusticewg@dec.ny.gov. For working group members, the meeting rooms are going to be muted to make sure that we cut down on noise. For working group members who are virtual, obviously we want everyone to raise their hands and indicate they would like to speak. For the purposes of the transcript, please state your name, and participants who are on video, please make sure that your name is listed on the WebEx. All right, next slide, please. So this is the agenda for today. Opening remarks. We'll go through roll call, approval of the minutes for folks who weren't here prior to the December meeting. We had a presentation, so we really only have the minutes from the December meeting to go over. If you weren't present at the December meeting, we asked that you probably just refrain from voting on the minutes since you weren't there to kind of make sure everything was okay. We're going to have a review process by Illume. Illume is back, everybody. Yes. Our partners in Illume are back, and they're going to go over the DAC review process. And then we are going to have another presentation on the disadvantaged communities indicators and some of those federal data sources, as was brought up during our last meeting as a concern. We'll have a bit of a discussion, and then we'll discuss next steps. So with all of that, let's move to roll call. So we will start with myself, Alana Cadell-Tuckey, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Yeah.
Michael DeRamio, hello everybody with NYSERDA.
Amy Klein, Capital Roots.
Neil Moscatello, DOH.
Elizabeth Firth, Department of Labor.
Okay, and we'll then go to Amber.
Hey y'all, Amber Johnson here, calling on a Binghamton with the New York Energy Democracy Alliance.
Hi, Amber. And Abby?
Sorry, I'm not sure if you mentioned my name, but Arif is present.
Oh, there you are, Arif. No, we haven't gotten to you yet.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Abby, were you able to unmute?
Hear me?
Yeah.
Any better? Oh,
We
okay.
got you.
I'm here. Abby McHugh, Climate Solutions Accelerator.
Thanks so much. Now we'll move to New York City. Arif.
Present. Thank you.
Now that, I see Raybrook. I think Raybrook is on. Jill, are you with us? Yep, there she is. I recognize the hat. It's the hat.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hi.
Hi, do you have to walk all the way up to the TV every time you speak?
No, I just wanted to touch the screen to see if it was muted on the screen.
Okay, I was gonna
I
say.
have a
I just called
microphone.
above. That's good
No,
to
I
hear.
got it. I got it. They're pretty
All right.
advanced. They got a new screen here.
Oh, great. That's fantastic. Thanks so much. Good to see you. With quorum being established, we can also welcome Julie Suarez, who is coming in virtually. Julie,
Julie Suarez, Cornell Cows. Thanks, Alana.
thanks, everyone. We now have quorum, which means we can deliberate and vote on any items that might come up. We're not required to vote today, and there is no vote necessarily on the schedule, but as we know from last year, if we decide to bring something to a vote, we can simply bring it to a vote. Okay, so moving on from the approval of the minutes, we are going to move to the next item on our agenda, which is to discuss the annual criteria with Illume. And again, very, very happy to welcome Alex Dunn back. It's been a bit since we've talked to Alex, and we're happy to have her here. Alex, please take it away.
Thank you. It's great to be back. Hello, everyone. And Jill, I hope it's warm in that room because you look bundled up.
It's actually a heat wave in the North Country right now. It's going to be 25 degrees today. I just walked in, so it's warm. Thank you for your concern.
Good. Good. And that is a heat wave for the North Country. Okay. Well, let's get started. Can you go to the next slide, please? So I think that it's great to see you all kind of getting back into this. One of the things that we wanted to help with this process was to kind of guide through the criteria review. And to do that, we're going to start again with the summary that I think we've gone through all the time about what the criteria are now and how they're looking. And then I also wanted to walk through a bit of the steps of just generally the criteria review process. So next slide. And as always, stop me if you have questions. Okay, blast from the past of last year. We've got 45 indicators, and they are falling into these different components and factor scores. So you've got the environmental burdens and climate risks, and then you've got the population characteristics and health. There are 20 indicators in the environmental burdens component and 25 in the population characteristics component. Next slide. Excuse me. For the environmental burdens, climate and change risks, we've got 3 different factors within that: the pollution exposures, land use, and facilities associated with historical discrimination or disinvestment, and then potential climate change risks. This factor, the potential climate change risks, is a double-weighted factor. So that means all the factors inside of it, when they're added, averaged together, that factor then is worth double in the total criteria. Next slide. Now we've got the population characteristics and health vulnerabilities. 4 factors here, which is why the other component score has a double-weighted factor. We've got income, education, employment, race, ethnicity, and language, health impacts and sensitivities, and housing, energy, and communications. Next slide. So if you all remember from the years past, when we first started this, the factor scores were multiplied, or the component scores were multiplied. But in the review of that first version, we decided to add instead of multiply because it felt like it matched better with the whole state ground truthing that we've done. So in this case, we now have 2 component scores that are added up together, and then those component scores are then added up across the health vulnerabilities. Next slide. Okay, this is different slide. New slide, yay. what we thought would be useful was actually to create a bit of a review process so that everyone on the working group would know which step kind of we're at and what can be thought of and done. So in this case, you've got the first step 1, the review of the current version, which is version 2, and then gathering input on those area of interest. From what I understand, last meeting, there was some discussion about these different components and the criteria during the working group meeting. And so now we're kind of at the step 2, review findings from areas of interest with the climate justice working group and others. And I think one of the areas of interest was the potential loss of data going in the future. So that's going to be spoken about in a little bit. And then the next step is, if needed, and it doesn't have to be needed, adjust the criteria, review and assess and value those changes, then deliberate and then vote on the criteria. Depending on how little or how big the discussions are and the changes are, these steps can take more than one meeting, several meetings, or just one meeting. It just really depends on what we're going after here. Any questions on this review process idea? Abby?
Can you hear me? You guys need to unmute me. Am I unmuted now? Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Good to see you. My question is maybe a question for you, maybe a question for Alana. I had thought that sometime soon, I actually thought it was today's meeting, that we were going to get a report on how the agencies are doing with the benefits and investments. And from my perspective, I don't know how we can assess if the criteria are working if we don't have information about that. So where in the process does that fit in?
Yeah, good question, Abby. And I'm going to hand that one to Alana to answer.
Hi, so that was the plan initially, but unfortunately we weren't able to move forward with that at this time. The goal is still for the working group to be able to use the reporting that comes out of the benefits and investments in order to sort of assess how the disadvantaged communities criteria is working. Even if we did have that report, we probably wouldn't have all of the reports that we will need to make that decision. It was really just sort of to give you an idea of exactly how state agencies and entities would be reporting out that information. We still do plan on having a presentation for you. We hope that will happen sooner rather than later. But the goal today would not be to necessarily assess whether or not the criteria is working based on that data, because again, we just really wouldn't have it today. It really is to kind of look at where we've been with the disadvantaged communities criteria and to see obviously if we need to make any tweaks moving forward. But the goal is still for us to present to you on that. We just were not able to do that today.
And just to build on that a little bit, to set expectations about when that data, so once that guidance is released, the final guidance for investment and benefits, we're likely looking at, I want to say 4 months or so, at the minimum 4 months before we actually are collecting all the data and then able to produce the report. So, you know, it's not sort of once it's released, it's immediately the data becomes available or anything like that, to launch.
Right. I think ideally, we should be able to have those reports in place by the time we would be identifying any potential changes moving for the 2026 review. We should be able to, again, I can't make any promises. I don't have a crystal ball, but the idea is that those reports, we'd actually have those results and be able to look at those as we're looking at criteria reviews for 2026.
Thank you.
Any other questions about this process? Okay. In a minute, I'm going to hand this over to Alana. I will say we've been tracking, because you know you could never really get rid of me, so we've been tracking everything and lurking everywhere. And thinking about updates and changes, I think, you know, from a data analysis perspective, version 2 was a big data refresh. And This is my view, not the state's. But it, to me, would be, regardless of whether you have information, kind of the more evaluative part, which I think is critical, Abby, to your point. I'd be wary of making any changes right now because V2 hasn't even been implemented yet. And you need several years to be able to start really seeing an effect of something. And so I'd be wary of making changes that would then cause other, kind of criteria going on or off for different regions. My own opinion on that, just had to insert it in there as the kind of neutral scientist part of me. Okay, I'm taking back the moderation hat, and then I'm going to fully hand it over to Alana to chat through her stuff.
Thank you, Alex. Next slide, please. So just as to kind of point that out for folks, the new maps are going to be released soon. Again, we've been working on it. We know that it's been a while, and we do apologize, but due to the large amount of data that the state programs are utilizing the DAC maps for, and all of the coordination that has to happen to ensure that there is understanding across these programs as to exactly what version of the map is used in what circumstance. It is taking a little bit longer than we initially anticipated. We do expect that the process is going to be expedited in the future. So we shouldn't have these long sort of breaks between when the working group votes and when it gets implemented. This is sort of the first time that we've done an update. So we're still working out some of the kinks in this. But now that we have an understanding of how the maps are going to be incorporated and used, this should move a lot more smoothly in the future. So what we have done to get DAC 2.0 a statewide release. I guess you can see here, we have continued to recommend no changes, as Alex said. We're continuing to develop all of the material that we need to have, all the material that's related to the disadvantaged communities criteria for working group members that are newer. The disadvantaged communities criteria is used beyond the climate justice working group's use in the CLCPA. It has been incorporated into other policies, other regulations, even other laws. So we obviously have to make sure that we have materials that reflect that and know what those uses are. Again, updating the maps based on the new criteria, calculating all of the new municipalities that are now counted, all the tables, including some of those new categories. We have to work on all of our GIS tools and all those changes that to kind of identify the changes that went between 1 and 2. And as we talked before, the guidance that now goes with that has to be adjusted based on the new information. And once we do that, we also have to make sure that we're briefing all the agencies and entities that are very specifically affected by the updates to DAC 2.0. So again, we're in the final stages. We really are going to release it soon. I've said it before. It's going to happen. I do promise it's going to happen. Next slide. So as I just stated, and as Alex stated, we as a state team currently recommend that we make no changes to the disadvantaged communities criteria based on all the things that Alex said and based on the elements that kind of I presented, all the elements that need to change, that we need to account for. We recommend that we make no changes at this time. Again, because we are updating version 2, there's just a lot of change and requires a significant amount of work just to ensure that every single program that uses the disadvantaged communities criteria is aligned throughout just the entire universe of agencies and entities and policies that use it. So again, reporting mechanisms, there are some that are available. Different agencies do have their reporting available, but the full organized reporting mechanism, it's going to be coming online. We're going to provide insight into the realities of how the implementation works, and the Climate Justice Working Group will get to review that as a part of their review process moving forward. All right, next slide. So here are the next steps. And again, based on what Alex stated as part of the review process, we're on step two. We did start sort of step two in December. We wanted to make sure that folks who weren't available in December would have an opportunity to also kind of, get into those discussions, make any suggestions, express any concerns. So the goal is to undergo steps 3, 4, and 5 in our next meeting, or if you guys look at it and say, we don't want to do 3, 4, and 5, let's just do it now, or take it now if you want to. Again, so this can be completed in our next meeting. This can complete it today if everybody so votes. Just want to let you know about the process. Okay. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns about that before we move forward? I don't see any hands up, so I'm going to say no. And we will move forward to talk about the indicator data sources and that review. And I am going to pass it to Oliver.
Hi, everybody. Next slide, please. I think we were going to have a quick an opportunity for discussion on that, but it sounds like nobody had any notes. So next slide. So as you may recall, we sent out a survey to identify what subjects the working group was interested in having a presentation on. The investments and benefits guidance was the #1 item, but the #2 item was DAC indicators based on federal data sources. Next slide, please. So as we've discussed, the DAC criteria is fundamentally based on 45 indicators, which are, demographic, environmental, economic data that describes the conditions of disadvantage as per the CLCPA. And the DAC criteria uses 45 indicators, which are ranked on by percentile. These ranks are based on underlying raw data, which comes from a variety of sources. Next slide, please. So 27 of the 45 DAC indicators are based on data from federal sources. They are predominantly related to pollution exposure and demographic data. On this slide, you'll see the 27 indicators based on federal data sources and their specific source. Next slide, please. So starting in January of 2025, the U.S. federal government began modifying and removing web pages and data sets across multiple federal agencies. The removals have affected resources pertaining to diversity, equity and inclusion initiatives, gender identity, public health research, environmental policy, and a variety of social programs. Modifications and removals have occurred most acutely to resources provided by the Center for Disease Control and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, I can speak, and the Census Bureau. Thank you. Next slide, please. So following a sequence of executive orders, federal government organizations removed or modified over 8,000 web pages and approximately 3,000 public-facing data sets. The data removal initiative also included the February 5th takedown of the EPA's Environmental Justice Mapping and Screening Tool, EJ-Screen. And while the public-facing federal data withdrawal has been tracked, the scope of the internal data removal is not yet fully understood. The Department of Governmental Efficiency was given the same directives to remove data, and we don't know the landscape of internal data products. Next slide, please. So in March 2025, the New York Times reported that there was an official and an unofficial federal agency guidance that directed the removal of all public-facing content and the elimination of all material pertaining to an index of keywords. This index is massive. It's but if you want to know, we can share it with you, or you can look it up yourself. In July 2025, national climate reports required by the Global Change Research Act of 1990 were removed from the federal government website. So globalchange.gov and climate.gov. Next slide. So there was some in January 2026, the EPA announced that it will no longer calculate how much money is saved in healthcare costs avoided and deaths prevented from air pollution rules that curb PM 2.5 and ozone. Next slide. So DAC indicators that are based on federal data sources could be at risk of becoming unreliable or defunct to unavailability, a failure to update, or low quality or veracity. Next slide. So the modification and deletion of federal resources, combined with the wide-scale regulatory rollbacks pertaining to climate change and environmental justice, indicate that the federal government may no longer be providing consistent and reliable data for New York to use in addressing these issues. And it's important to emphasize that the next likely DAC data refresh would be 2030, concurrent with the census. Next slide. So we decided to do a qualitative analysis on this, the objective of which was to identify the DAC indicators that could have the biggest impact on the DAC criteria if they went away. This qualitative analysis is based on 3 elements: the current vintage and update status of the data underlying the DAC indicator, the reliability and risk based on the federal data source, and the reliability and risk based on the indicator subject. Next slide. So vintage, DAC indicator sources have a current vintage, which is the date that they were last updated, and the current set ranges from 2019 to 2025. They also have a variety of expected updated cadences, with the majority expected to be updated annually. Next slide, please. So because EJ screen was pulled down, PM 2.5, wastewater discharge, proxy to regulated management plan sites, vehicle traffic density, and homes built before 1960 were all sourced through EJ screen, which has been continued and cannot be sourced through that platform. These indicators are considered to have a high qualitative vintage risk. Next slide, please. So for medium outliers in vintage include benzene concentration, 80% over area median income, and proxy to power generation facilities. So these are considered to have a medium qualitative vintage risk. And the remainder have either been updated in 2024 or 2025 and are expected to be continued to be updated annually. Next slide, please. So again, DAC indicators that are based on federal sources are sourced from the EPA, FEMA, EJ Screen, the NLCD, the National Land Cover Database, and the American Community Survey, which is the census. Next slide, please. So EJ, as noted, has been discontinued, and thus the indicators sourced from there are at the highest source risk. Benzene concentration and proxy to power generation facilities are both sourced from the EPA, which has recently removed or modified certain data to support industrial and economic activity and to move away from considering climate change and environmental justice. As such, pollution data like benzene concentration is at a high source risk, while proxy to power generation facilities may continue to have relevance to the EPA's objectives and is plausibly maintained. Next slide. Low vegetative cover and agricultural land are based on the NLCD, which has limited application outside of environmental protection work, though it could be of continued use to the EPA for agricultural work. Flooding in inland areas projected has relevance to insurance markets and is the most current data basis that we have. So this is considered to have a low risk. Next slide. The remaining indicators are sourced from the American Community Survey, where a large amount of data removal and modification has occurred. while it is likely that the census in the American Community Survey would be maintained, the potential for data quality issues is prevalent. As such, these indicators are considered to have a qualitatively medium source risk. Next slide, please. So next, we're going to be talking about subject risk. When considering subject risk, the indicator subject has been compared to the current slate of data removals and modifications to estimate its relevance to the current federal administration's agenda. Subjects directly pertaining to climate change, environmental justice, and pollution burdens that have limited relevance to other subject areas are considered to have the highest subject risk. They include benzene concentration, PM 2.5, and wastewater discharge. Next slide. Demographic information relating to those data removal topics and initiatives listed in slides 22 and 23 are considered to have a medium subject risk. They are mostly sourced through the ACS, which compounds the potential for data quality issues and the growing reality that these groups of people are targeted and maligned by the administration's agenda. These include percent Latino and/or Hispanic, percent without health insurance, limited English proficiency, percent Black or African American, percent Native American or Indigenous, percent Asian, and percent with disabilities. Next slide. Additionally, pollution-related indicators that may have relevance to other subjects are considered to have a medium subject risk. So this is proxy to power generation facilities and low vegetative cover, and everything else is considered to have a low qualitative subject risk. Next slide, please. So we've synthesized an approximation of qualitative cumulative risk based on these three categories. Based on that, we can see the PM 2.5 wastewater discharge, proxy to regulated management plan sites, and benzene concentration, all of which in all pollution exposure indicators are at the highest qualitative risk of federal data withdrawal and could have the biggest impact if they were no longer available. The biggest impact to the DAC criteria, I should specify. Next slide, please. So in addition to the qualitative analysis that we did, Illum, very happy to have them back, conducted a regression analysis of indicators that are the largest levers. So these are the indicators with the greatest unique influence on the criteria as a whole. And again, we've ranked it out here for you to take a look at. Next slide, please. So what do we do with this? So the potential to reproduce state-specific versions of these data sources has been considered, as well as viable alternatives from the DEC focused on those indicators that are at highest qualitative risk. Wastewater discharge could be reproduced through SPEDIES, the State Pollution Discharge Elimination Systems Permit Program. Proxy to regulated management plan sites could be reproduced using real property data, and vehicle traffic density could be reproduced approximately using the DOT's traffic data viewer. Next slide. It is extremely unlikely that PM 2.5 or benzene could be reproduced if they did go away, and all the demographic data would be incredibly difficult to reproduce. Most of these could be worked through some application of real property data, but again, that demographic data is irreplaceable. Next slide, please. So the final matrix, considering the qualitative cumulative risk and the largest levers and the reproducibility, this represents the potential highest impacts to the DAC criteria, and if that underlying data became unavailable. So we've got PM 2.5 and wastewater discharge at the top, and so forth. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's it. Do you have any questions, comments, anything you would like to go back and talk about?
So just to reiterate that this data we won't be looking at refreshing it until 2030. So this is all sort of looking towards the future
This
of.
is, yeah, this is forecasting for sure. We won't have new census data until 2030, which is closer than you think. So we probably won't do a major renovation before then. It's possible something can come up, but it's probably unlikely. Yeah, Alex.
I just want to kind of clarify the distinction between like the census tract geographic data won't be updated until 2030, but not necessarily all the other census ACS, American Community Survey data.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is a situation where you may all observe, or we may all be observing a change, a demographic shift or some other data shift, and want to relook at those data and refresh it in some way. But that would be different from the 2030 full census tract update.
Yeah, the major census tract update, like what we just did, updating to, or are in the process of doing, updating to the 2020 census. I see a hand up in New York City.
Yeah, thanks, Oliver, for this overview. And it's interesting to look at the risks and also, what is reproducible. Given how important PM 2.5 is to informing DAC criteria and the difficulty in reproducing it, are there alternatives that we can look at? And so it's not that the state is producing that data, but maybe it's a partnership with an academic institution or some climate modeling, whatever. I don't know, but it seems to be something that I mean it's such an important one, and with the risk, what do we do?
I mean, that is, I can make recommendations and I can shoot from the hip on what I think would be the first steps, but that's kind of the role of this group, I would think, is to have those discussions and figure out what to do next. We're trying to set a table for you to have these discussions. I don't know if I can really give you a recommendation.
I mean, there's
off the cuff.
community collected data, but that's not comprehensive, of course, and not all DAC communities are collecting that data. I don't know, because I don't know who is collecting that data, right? Are there other places? So that's why I'm asking the question of you, and I would like to hear your recommendations, but I'll put myself on mute again because I see that there are other hands up.
Yeah.
Julie's had her hand up for a bit.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have her on my screen. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. I am, again, sorry to not be there in person. This may be sort of an academic or esoteric question, but it struck me when I was watching the federal, or looking at the presentation from you, Oliver, on which indicators are most at risk. And this is a little bit esoteric because the federal government has said they're going to stop collecting food insecurity data. But this may be more of a question for Illuma, for the group who's on this group for longer. Is there a reason why we didn't consider food insecurity per capita rates as part of disadvantaged community criteria?
Alex, I see you've had your hand up, and you might be able to answer that a little quicker than I can.
The answer kind of jives also with the previous question. And I think that we looked at food desert, we looked at quite a few different elements, and there were high correlations across other indicators. And so we chose the one that we felt was the best spread and distribution. And Julie, if you want to, we would be happy to go through some of that history so that you have it, and so that you're kind of can see all the decisions that were made in those very first years. Because there was a lot of going through a lot of different indicators and trying to see which ones were best, not just from kind of the most important, like that measure that you're recommending would be a really, really good one to have, but it wasn't always consistently measured. And so we were trying to balance solid measurement of and good data with correlations of other indicators. And this also brings to mind wearing my technical hat. One of the things, if some of these indicators, if we start losing data or being unable to refresh those data, what we can start to do is to identify like correlates, statistical correlates in some ways. What is a measure that is showing similar data to PM 2.5 that we could then use as a proxy going forward if we do lose those data? So this analysis, I think that's worthwhile to investigate in addition to following along with the how do we measure PM 2.5 in a robust way, or finding those data out in the wild right now, which we've been looking in the past year. We've been looking at this because we knew it was going to be an issue. And, there's no easy answer to give you right now, other than I think it's well worth doing additional correlational analyses to start tracking some of this.
To bounce off of that, and so that I'm not completely dodging Arif's question, yeah, we would find the next best analog, the something that correlates strongly, could certainly be found, and there's certainly data products, novel data products that we could develop to fill the gaps if we felt like we needed to. I know we just mentioned food scarcity, and that is something we could build. Access to green space is something that we could build. Gentrification is something that we could build, but we need to make sure that it is consistent with the criteria as a whole, and it is a meaningful corollary to the data that we could lose if we lose it. I don't want, to start a panic like these things are going to disappear tomorrow, but we should at least be thinking about it now.
That was just really helpful to me, so thank you.
I really like the idea of other data variables that are highly correlated to ones that are at risk.
Yeah, and we're interested in, creating a stable model for this. It's really, really difficult for the entire universe that's using the DAC criteria to pivot every time we change things. So if we're going to make changes, we need to make sure that they are substantive and meaningful and improving our capture of the conditions that are occurring in New York State. So there's certainly a path towards, not being reliant on federal data sources, but it's something that's going to have to be done very thoughtfully and very deliberately.
Oliver showed you the kind of the regression analysis kind of findings. We don't have to go to the numbers, but I do want to say that, the ones that have the most impact are the ones in the factor that's a double weighted factor in that environmental score. But even amongst those, when you have 45 different indicators in the criteria, no one is huge. So even those that are in there, taking one out of that factor is not going to like blow up the whole system. So I think it's really important to kind of think through, yes, there are potential threats to the data, and it's really important that we track those and start looking at correlates and thinking through what could happen. If we lose this, what could we measure? How could we look at it? But I think it's also really important to stay grounded in the fact that we have 45 indicators. That's a lot of data. That means each one of those is just a tiny, tiny influence and in the whole criteria set. And there are way bigger things in the decisions about kind of the coverage, say 35%, or all those different elements, the individual criteria that have a much bigger weight than each individual ones. Now, one caveat to that is if, all the ACS data goes away, if there are critical ones like that, that's a big swath of data that are really important in this. And you could lose a big chunk of it. That said, I think if we lose those, I think we'll be worrying about a lot more in this world, in this country. So here's hoping we don't, for so many reasons.
And not to catastrophize, but one aspect of that is, you know, the ACS data may still exist, but we may not trust it. There's certainly a component of quality that should be considered as we go forward. But that's a conversation for another day, I think.
It is. Though I will say one positive-ish note, there was a similar concern during the 2020 census because of the way that that was handled and the change in outreach and a lot of fears of people being underrepresented. There were some really good studies coming out of that to see whether folks were understudied in certain regions or not. New York State in particular was not undercounted in the 2020 census, and it reflected reality pretty well. I'm a bit of an optimist, although it's hard in this day and age right now, but I want to say that thankfully there's a lot of technical statisticians behind a lot of this that are helping to keep that as consistent as possible. So it's definitely something to track and to be looking at. And I think that Oliver's list is a great one for us longitudinally to start looking at and taking notes of, here's what we're seeing. This might not look as good as it used to be. This one looks like we're going to lose the vintage. But at least for now, with the data that we have with the update, and I'm so glad we did it last year, even though we didn't really want to make such a big change from V1 to V2, is that now we have the best, most recent data possible for all the criteria. And thank goodness we have that, because that can stay alive for a good many years.
Yeah, the thoughtful and incredible work that this group has done thus far has put us in a really good position to be resilient to potential changes, to theoretical, hypothetical changes. But it is something that we should, you know, row away from the rocks on. Are there any more questions, comments?
Yeah, along those lines of vintage data, it's Arif again. Thanks for bringing that up, which I think is a really good point. What is our sort of regularity in terms of data updates? What are we using right now? Just focusing specifically on PM 2.5. What is the year that we're looking at, and when were we expected to update that? Because I mean, if it's in 3 years from now, I think, you know, hopefully that puts us in a better position, even if this data set disappears.
I'm pulling it up right now. PM 2.5 is its current vintage is 2023.
And we obviously have 2023 is the latest data available, is what you're saying, Oliver?
Yeah, and that's what's integrated into the upcoming version of the DAC criteria.
But that is the latest data available for PM 2.5?
Yes.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
We have a hand up in Albany.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, as Department of Labor is sort of the conduit for ACS, so we're happy to partner and talk about changes and updates as we see them. So I'm just offering that hand. I think we are also worried about this stuff. And then from what you just said, come back to me. I had a thought about that. Oh, yeah. So because Alex, you had said maybe if there are things before 2030, we want to talk about updating demographic changes or changes we're noticing. What sort of is maybe the bellwether, or what would indicate something that you'd want? What would say like, oh yeah, we should look at those again because we see something changing. I don't know what that would be before 2030.
I'm gonna give you like the worst politician answer of like it depends. But I think it really does. And what I mean by that is what we will be doing, what the kind of what should be done for monitoring the criteria annually is to be tracking demographic changes, to be tracking things in the news or understanding where swaths of data or could be not representative of what's actually happening on the ground. And so in those cases, that's when we'd want to figure out whether it's something we can measure. Now, I will say for the ACS data that we have, we're using 5-year estimates because that is absolutely the ones we should be using. So that means it kind of like averages big swaths, like changes across the time because it's trying to aggregate and reduce the amount of error, measurement error in those different data. And so they're not super sensitive to big changes. But to me, it's kind of like if a big demographic change happened or if a big pollution hazard happened in New York State somewhere, we'd want to look at that and figure out whether there was a way that we could use data to understand how that could influence DAC criteria. So it's more of a big events monitor throughout the time to be aware of and then discuss it here. Make sense?
Yeah, I guess so. It's kind of just having our ear to the ground and year to year in this specific meeting, talking about if folks are seeing differences or big precipitating events that might do that for all 45 criteria.
Well, I think and also beyond those criteria, right? But I'm not sure that it's like an annual thing. It's just more of a, this is the task of the working group, and particularly I would say DEC or whoever is monitoring the data or monitoring the criteria, and then bringing that to this group if there's something that, is of import. And then also on the flip side, you all bringing the ideas or thoughts on the other side.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on it. And the thing that would kind of trip my curiosity is if something was really late or delayed in any way. That might trigger my interest in poking into the data and seeing if everything feels okay. But yeah, it's kind of a wait and see, watch the horizon. Yeah, Arif.
About that. Do we automatically pull in the most recent data? So you just mentioned that the vintage of the PM 2.5 data is 2023. How often is that updated, and do we pull it in as soon as it's updated?
We don't pull it in as soon as it's updated. So we updated all of the underlying data for the indicators to the most recent vintage as a part of the DAC 2.0 update. So whenever this group decides to, according to the CLCPA, you're supposed to review every year. And at that point, you may make changes or updates. And if you decide to update, then we'll update it. But again, we need to be cognizant of the need for stability for this system. There's so many things that are using DACs for so many different purposes, and it's really the best capture of the conditions of disadvantage. It's one of the best in the world, and we need to make sure that as we pilot this thing, we don't rock the boat too much, So as things move, if something's supposed to be updated on an annual basis and it doesn't make that annual trigger, that's when I'll start looking into it and being like, okay, what's going on here? And bring it to you. And of course, you're all in the world too. You're seeing things, you're reading news articles too. If you see something that doesn't feel right, let's talk about it.
Yeah, thanks, Oliver. The reason I'm asking is for those data sets that you've identified as being high risk, even if we're not pulling that data into the consideration into DAC, at a particular point, maybe we can just monitor those data sets. So as soon as they are updated, we at least have the latest data sets for those high risk criteria.
Yeah, that's certainly something we can do.
Yeah, and I will say that on the Illum side, when EJ screen was going down, you know, we pulled down a bunch of data so that we could
So
have
did
that.
we. Yeah, there was a lot of folks who
Yeah.
built little arcs to save the data.
And but your point is a really good one as far as like monitoring and updating the data. The ACS data is something that we monitor kind of more regularly, even though I wouldn't recommend updating it annually. But I think for all of those EJ screen ones, we'll see. We'll have to find other options and ways to pull down the data. 2023, as far as vintage, in my view, is pretty darn recent for PM 2.5.
I agree.
So I'm happy with the fact that we got that in there.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, just as a practice, if it's not too difficult to, even if we're not pulling it into our consideration, just having that as the most recent set of data. And if we're not able to do it, maybe we can work with organizations like Open Environmental Data Project that, you know, they are rescuing data, right? And maybe we can point them to specific data sets that they can monitor on a regular basis. Thank you.
100%. Also, for reference, the PM 2.5 data from EPA that we were using for the first version was from 2016. And it was labeled 2019 on EJ screen, but it was vintage from the EPA in 2016. So it's not refreshed too much. All that said, you're totally right. I think that there is worthwhile kind of setting up almost like an Excel sheet with, especially with Oliver's kind of list of high priority data and tracking what vintage, where it is, if we can pull new data and start pulling those so that if anything does go, we at least have the most recent.
Yeah, I've got a tracker that I use for this project. So we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll let you know if anything sparks our curiosity.
Thank you.
I guess one question I have is some of the indicators that we have here. I just want to understand if there is a rationale for why they may go away, or is it simply that they are part of the data sources that we pulled from?
So the rationale is not the idea behind this is that the trend of data withdrawal with the federal government indicates that they could go away. So the rationale behind this and the objective behind this was to identify which ones would have the greatest impact if they did go away. I can't tell you whether or not they're going to go away. I can guess. Well, it's not a guess. It's a criteria. It's a rubric. I went through it and figured out what seemed to be the most likely to be at risk, but that's not definitive by any means. And the emphasis is on if these go away, how will that impact the DAC criteria in our work here?
Yeah, just, I mean, as one example, I mean, the housing vintage one, you know, built prior to 1960. I mean, that some of that information is collected in multiple sources. I mean, there's the ACS, but there's also the REX, which I always forget what it stands for, Residential Energy Consumption Survey. That, you know, so I guess I'm just wondering, you know, I think this may be something for us, like I think was mentioned before, like corollaries, analogs. It would be good to look at where, you know, there might be other data sources. I mean, they're still federal, right? So I guess it still does leave an open question for me of, like, in some cases, are these really likely? Like, I'm not sure what the rationale is that not collecting data on housing vintage, like what would be the reason for that, right? Why would they not collect housing vintage if they're doing a survey of any kind, right, on the homes? So I'm not saying you have to have an answer for that right now, Oliver, just.
No, I think the work we did is reflective of that. If I recall, the housing vintage is a medium. I mean, it could go, it could not. And it's certainly something that we could reproduce. You know, New York State maintains real property data, which includes the year the building was built. So if we didn't want to rely on federal data for that, we wouldn't have to.
Your point, Michael, I think that I'm seeing a tracking sheet of all tracking sheets, but I think it's actually worthwhile to like adapt what Oliver's got and to also identify potential corollaries or alternative measures. And then if something comes up, I mean, we could pull down those data and then start comparing them and looking at them, you know, housing vintage being one of those where we would want to look at the error in the measurement between REX and ACS, and then we'd want to look at the coverage of it all and how it's comparing and make an assessment there. And, you know, I think it's a good thing for us to be doing and tracking as we go along in that way, in addition to other corollaries like out of the box thinking of what does PM 2.5 correlate within our current set of data, and then even outside of that, what we could look for. Even if it's really weird, it's still a correlation that if it jives close enough, we could use as a proxy for PM 2.5. I have no idea what that would be right now, by the way.
Last call for questions, comments, concerns. All right, hearing none. Alana, you want to close this out? Thank you, everybody.
Sure. So I guess I'll, with our next steps, sorry, next slide, please. I guess I'll kind of start that off with posing a question to working group members. What do we want to do? Do we want to move on to, we still have some time here together. Do we want to move on to steps 3, 4, and 5 today? Do we want to hold that off until another meeting? Do we feel that we have the information that we need to, I mean, you have the state team's recommendation that we don't make any changes during this round. Do we want to go into deliberations and the top as we vote on criteria? Are people still wanting to look at adjusting some of the criteria, reviewing and maybe assessing some of those values? What are folks thinking right now and feeling?
I'd be ready to move into deliberations. I think you make a powerful case for why we shouldn't be making changes. Making these constant changes when we haven't been able to analyze the impact, it just seems fruitless. And a lot of work.
Any other working group members?
Yeah, I wanted to just pause because I'm always talking, but I'm good with that. The one thing that I will just state is it's not so much the criteria. It's that last time I brought up something about flooding data in relation to a community in Southeast Queens and utilizing data from the U.S. Geological Survey. So not the criteria, but at least looking at other data sources for at least that one criteria. And maybe if we wanted to further examine other criteria too, we could, but at least for the flooding data, looking at U.S. Geological Survey.
We have a question here.
Abby, did you have your hand up? Or did you unmute? Oh, wait, do I need to unmute you? I think I do.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Though I'm fully supportive of not making any changes, I would prefer not to vote today because I do feel very strongly about wanting that report on the benefits and investments. And given that we are only required to meet once a year, honestly, I want to make sure that we meet again. So I would like to hold off on voting until we do get that report.
Okay. Just again, pointing out that we wouldn't be seeing a full report probably until the summer.
Well, does it matter? Do we, I mean, we did just vote on the updated, update with the.
I can definitely double check. If that's your stance, I don't necessarily see a problem. I mean.
I think it's very important for the Climate Justice Working Group to have that information on a regular basis.
Yep, understood.
I want to just agree with Abby. I would really be interested in that report. Thanks, Abby.
Thanks, guys. Julie, you had your hand up?
Sure. I don't really have a position as to whether we vote today or move to deliberations today. I just simply wanted to say that I find the criterion to be really thorough and really thoughtful. And so I'm comfortable in moving to deliberations and moving forward with the state's recommendation. I agree. I'd love to see data on impact. I think that's really important to see how the criterion are actually influencing policy. But I also know that these things take a while to assess and take a while to compile. And I really think that the criteria are as thoughtful as we can be in an area where data sources may be more questionable in the future. And so just kudos to the team, and it's nice to have a loom back.
So you probably unmute me. So there doesn't seem to be a full consensus on basically to vote or today. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just to what Alex said, about, Alex, you mentioned wanting to update ACS every year. And so from that, I'm like, Alex, what do you think about?
Don't want to update ACS every year. To
Oh,
be
I thought
clear.
you said you.
No,
Oh, I
no,
thought
no,
you
no.
wanted to, oh, okay. I know
Yeah.
you were talking about the 5-year estimates.
Yeah, I was
but-
talking to the 5-year estimates, and I do think that for data monitoring, we should be downloading and looking at those data every
I
year.
see. Okay.
But merely as a analytical task that the DEC folk would do, or we would do, or whoever would do, so that we know if there's anything weird going on, we can start, raising flags, etc. But no,
So
I was,
monitoring, that's what you
yeah.
meant. Okay.
I think right now we really should be in a monitoring stage. And that's mostly because it was a huge shift last time. And I think it does need time to measure and assess. I think it's pretty important for us to be able to look and make sure that we're evaluating the criteria with some time. But that's my own opinion. I did give it to DEC as a recommendation, but I'm holding my stance there. Since you asked.
Thank you. So since it doesn't seem like we have a consensus to move to a vote, it does seem that we will probably have to come back together again to kind of continue our conversation. As we put it out, we did vote on the criteria in February. We obviously will keep pushing and moving along here on the state government side to make sure that we have all of the data available for folks to make those informed decisions. We hopefully should be at the very least going out to state agencies and entities with regards to their reporting data. But again, just making note that we won't have those reports kind of all settled until at least 4 to 5 months after that notification goes out. So if we can we definitely don't want to wait 4 to 5 months to have another conversation. So what we'll do is we will probably send out another poll for folks to try to get the meeting. Hopefully by then we'll have some more information for folks to discuss, but well, sorry, Amy.
Yep, so I just want to understand what you're saying. So what Abby was saying was she wanted to hold off the vote until you had the data about what the implementation has looked like. And what I just heard you say is that we wouldn't hold off until we had that, we would meet before that.
Well, we're going to need to meet before that anyway, to just kind of go through the elements of the disadvantaged communities criteria, or those elements that the working group has to vote on that are outside of the disadvantaged communities criteria. So working on community air monitoring, updates on extreme heat, other elements that the working group kind of is sort of tied into that don't specifically have to do with the disadvantaged communities criteria or the CLCPA. And hopefully there is potential for information to kind of be available in those intervening times. We'll try to pull people back together. But I would say that when it comes to the actual reports, not having that reporting released, or that actual guidance release, when it talks about the actual reports that will come, those aren't going to be available until probably sometime looking in the summer, or correlated, or in a place where everybody can then review and look at them, until probably sometime in the late spring, early summer. But when it comes to having the guidance out and available, we're hoping that'll be out very soon.
I'm just wondering about timing here, if we're like we're saying is true, and this also assumes we get this out, relatively soon. The data comes in, we have quality assurance on it. We can be able to then publish that report by summertime, let's say. That is pretty close to, I guess my question is around what is our annual review timeframe? Because I do worry that I just want to point out, I guess, that if we're delaying the vote, then we may end up in a situation where we're voting and then very shortly after they're starting another review right after that.
That is entirely possible.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everybody's clear that could be what we're setting up here if we do delay until that report is ready is all.
Take a vote on whether to vote.
Okay.
Just vote.
Yeah. Arif, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think that this sets a good precedent for how we, this is the sequence for how we take these votes. So where we should have this reporting as a way to inform our vote. So I hear what you're saying, Michael, and I do appreciate the sort of tight timeline, but maybe this is the sort of a template for how we do it in subsequent years. And maybe we use that as some leverage with agencies saying like, look, we need these reports from you to be able to make this decision. I don't know if that really holds any weight, but I think that that's just a better sequence.
And yep, and like we said, the goal is to make sure that we do have all this information to the extent that we can available to help the working group make their decisions on the criteria. It's just that it's not available at this point. So it has been kind of proposed that maybe we should vote on whether or not we should vote. What I saw was that we don't have a consensus, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't move to vote. So I'm going to move that we, at the very least, vote to see if we should vote on moving forward today. So does anybody want to second that?
I'll second.
Okay, so we're going to vote on whether or not we should kind of push this along. And I will start, I'm in favor of moving this along. I understand, Abby and Arif, I understand folks' concerns. That we want to make sure that we have this information in order to make these decisions, but we're looking at possibly not having this information until the summer, and then having to then quickly have a turnaround where we have to then work on the criteria again. And since we will have this information when it comes to the 2020 the 2026 review, that's when we would actually be looking at it. We wouldn't necessarily, I'm just saying, I don't know if I agree that we need it for the current review process that we're having now for 2025. And if the goal is to close out the 2025 process, I would prefer not to close that out in the summer of 2026.
I have a question to clarify, a clarifying question. Is a vote required to close out what is considered a review?
We have identified that that's the most efficient way to determine that the review is closed, is to vote. There's nothing specific in the law that requires it. It's just the way that we've determined that's how we will close things out. That's sort of the most concise way to do it. Okay, well, my vote is to vote to move things forward. And we'll start here in Albany.
And I vote to move things forward. I feel like there's consensus that I haven't heard anyone suggesting that we modify the criteria or we look at the data again. So I think it's really a question of when we get the reporting, and I'm hearing from the agencies that we are going to get it. It's a question of when, and I don't think it's going to impact our decision on the criteria. So I would vote to move forward with voting.
I guess Michael.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I would agree that well, first of all, I just want to say I share the desire to and the expressed, I think Arif, you expressed that is part of our process, that looking at where investments are going and is the criteria being used as intended. Although I am aware that this group, its purview is really on the definition of the criteria, not on the direction of how programs are using that criteria. So I just want everybody to bear that in mind as well. So I do think it's useful information, and does set it would be a good part of the process to include that review as part of the deliberation on an annual basis. I do think similar to Amy, honestly, I would if we didn't have to vote, that would almost be more preferable. If we have to vote, I would say we should. I do vote in support of closing out this review, because I do think that I don't hear similarly that there's a need to consider changing, and for the reasons we've stated earlier, that we do want to actually see some of this through at first and see put it into practice, and then learn from that. Maybe we'll learn something from that that we can then bring back to the group. So long-winded response, but just to say that I support us moving forward for now, and commit. I would like to see us committing us at the same time to bring the report here for discussion and consideration as part of next year's deliberation. And when I say next year, I mean really this year.
Right.
The latter
2026 deliberation.
Yeah.
I agree. Neil?
Yeah, thanks. Based on what I've heard, and I agree, given the need to vote on the 2025 review, I vote to move forward, as you mentioned here, and I agree with this idea that it would be helpful to have the report moving forward to potentially think about as we have future meetings and do the 2026 review. But for now, it feels if we're voting to move forward with a vote.
Is it?
I'm abstaining. If we vote, I will vote, but I'm abstaining from this question.
Okay. Amber?
I'm also gonna abstain from this voting if that's possible.
Okay. And Abby? Oh, I need to unmute you, don't I? All right, go on.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were muted.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna, recognizing that I will likely be outvoted, I'm gonna continue to be the squeaky wheel, simply because, my commitment as a member of the Climate Justice Working Group is to the implementation of the CLCPA. And I think we as representatives of the community have an obligation to the communities we serve to make sure that investments are going where they are needed and the benefits are being realized as the law intended. And we just don't know because we have not seen that information. And I think we have been waiting for it for a long, long time and asking for it for a long, long time. So recognizing that the agencies are, I'm sure, doing your very best, and this is a huge, complicated thing to, put together. Again, I do feel quite strongly about it, so I would prefer to delay the vote.
Thanks, Abby. Arif?
Yeah, what Abby said.
Right. And Julie?
I'm actually going to take a little bit of a contrary opinion. Sorry, Abby and Arif, and just say I'm going to vote to move forward. I do think closing out the 2025 review makes sense to me, so I'm good with voting that. I think the criteria are really thorough, but I do also agree that having the report will be super helpful, and I look forward to taking a look at that and comparing it to our review criteria to make sure that the CLCPA is implemented.
Okay. Thank you, Julie.
Good. There's also Jill.
Yes, Jill. Do you need to be unmuted too, Jill? I think she does.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
So I also don't have an ability to raise my hand here. So this whole time I haven't been able to unmute or raise my hand. But
Well, go off then. Go on.
Well,
You
I
don't
agreed with what everybody is saying. I think regardless of having the report today, I would vote not to change anything. I feel strongly about Alex's point of view of from a scientific standpoint, it's detrimental to change the criteria at this soon in the process. I am also really eager. I feel like I have been the one who's been bringing up this report this whole time. I'm really eager to see this report. And while I recognize that it is our job to create the criteria, we cannot work in that silo. We have to see if the criteria is effective, and that report is instrumental in helping us figure that out. That said, back to my original point, regardless of if I had that report today, I would still vote to keep the criteria the same for now. Thanks.
Okay. So it looks like we have 6 in favor of moving forward with a vote, 2 in favor of waiting, and 2 are abstaining. So it looks like we're going to move forward with voting today. So with that, would anybody like to call to move forward with a vote? Paul, would anybody like to second? Second. All right. With that said, we will move forward with voting on closing out the review for 2025, and then moving forward later, when we'll talk about next steps for moving forward with the 2026 criteria review. All right. We will start here in the boardroom here in Albany. I vote in favor to move forward with closing out the 2025 criteria review.
We should see our name or.
Yeah, maybe we should. Hi, Alana Cadell-Tucky, DEC. I vote in favor of closing this out.
And not making changes, is that?
And yes, and not making changes. We're adding things. Yes, that's fine. So, all right, I'm going to start over. It's like no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. I'm going to start over. I vote in favor of closing out the 2025 and not making any changes to the current disadvantaged communities criteria.
Is that the motion is that what we're voting on?
Maybe, yes, let's make that the motion that we're voting on. As for what we're going to do and what we're going to use moving forward in the 2026 criteria, I want to leave that for the 2026 criteria. But for now, again, motion that we vote on closing out this element, this criteria review, and not change anything in the criteria at this time.
Michael D'Aremio with NYSERDA, I vote yes on that motion.
Amy Klein, Capital Roots, I vote in favor.
Yeah, Muscatello, Department of Health, I vote in favor as well.
Elizabeth Firth, Department of Labor, I vote in favor.
Moving on to Amber.
Amber Johnson, I vote in favor.
Moving on to Abby.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I didn't mute you again.
Oh, excellent. Okay, thank you. I also vote in favor.
Arif.
Favor.
Julie.
Julie Suarez, I vote in favor of the motion.
And Jill.
Jill Hank, I vote in favor.
Okay, with all the votes cast, we have voted to close out this session of review for the 2025 Disadvantaged Communities Criteria Review and to not make any changes to the current version of the Disadvantaged Communities Criteria. Moving forward, next steps, obviously we will be looking to start the 2026 review for the Disadvantaged Communities Criteria. But before that, we will start scheduling some meetings for the Climate Justice Working Group to kind of take care of some of those quote unquote housekeeping tasks that are outside of the CLCPA, which include updates or updating us on what's moving forward with the community air monitoring, extreme heat action plan, and other elements that include the Climate Justice Working Group as consultants. So we'll look forward to move that, and we will also keep the working group updated on when all of the data, including the guidance for reports, is going to be sent out, and when the maps are also subsequently released. We'll make sure that everybody knows when that is going to happen, and hopefully that happens very soon. Okay. With all of that being settled, if there are no additional questions or comments, we can look to close things out for today. Does anybody have anything else they would like to bring up before we end things today and we reach out to you via email?
Can we just somehow coalesce around Abby's really strong desire to ensure that we are getting and reviewing the report and that data? Because I think a number of people, Abby has voiced it, but I think a number of people feel very strongly about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be important before we close the meeting to coalesce around that.
I think so, and I agree that that information should be available, and the goal is moving forward for us to have that information available to us. So while we're making our decisions, reviewing the disadvantaged communities criteria on an annual basis, that we have all of the available information to help inform our decision making.
So what is there a
Yes.
specific suggestion?
Is there a specific, yes, is there a suggestion? Do you think that we would need to vote on that, or are we comfortable with saying that we agree that that should be a part of the process moving forward?
Can we put a date on it? I mean, I know that it's a work in progress, but can we say that, as the Climate Justice Working Group members, we are asking that by X date, we would be able to review this information?
Should we try to make that a part of because again, the goal here is to also try and make sure that we have a streamlined process so that we know what we're doing and when. Do we want to sort of look to add that as part of the process, that at this particular point, we look at the reports, the working group receives the reports, just like we send you the disadvantaged communities report that shows if there were any changes in any of the data sources. Do we want that to now be a part of that sort of package that gets sent maybe in August? Is that something, Julie, you have your hand up?
I think that makes sense.
Different issue, sorry.
Can I ask a follow-up question for Michael about this? Like, is it realistic for us to put a date on this and then expect the state to meet that request? Like, I understand there's a lot of people working on this and a lot of work going into this report, and I think it's really important for our next 2026 deliberation to have this information and to have it ahead of time so that we're prepared and we can have maybe a couple of meetings where we go back and forth. But at this point, we're hearing it's still not out. And then after it comes out, we have 4, maybe 5 months for the data to be like calibrated within it. So it's February now. So is that even a realistic expectation for this year?
I think the key to underscore there is this year. I think it will likely be a realistic expectation to build it into our process. I think when we're asking the whole of the state government to start collecting data and information that they may or may not be collecting, and we're going to be trying to help them to build their capacity to collect. So we do expect this will build and get easier and more expected and easier to predict over time. Our best estimate is like what I said earlier of how long it will take for us to do this for this year. So I was going to suggest that, rather than maybe a specific date, we would say a certain, once the data is, so here's what I'm trying to parse out here. There's the investment and benefits guidance, which is the instructions, if you will, of what to assign as a DAC investment versus what is not a DAC investment. That's something we're prepared to come and speak to once that's been fully finalized and released for all the agencies. And then there's the report, which is the one after we've collected all the data, made sure it's accurate, and included it as part of a dashboard on the Climate Act website. Those are our plans. We could then say, once that report is published this year, 2 weeks from then, or whatever, I don't know if in terms of scheduling, Alana, what would be realistic, but we could certainly make a
Work that
commitment
out.
of,
That we know once this is released,
Once it's
within
released.
this period of time, we can.
yeah,
I mean, obviously, this year is a little bit difficult to kind of assess, but the goal is to try to make sure that we have that with some regularity, that the goal is that state agencies will be reporting at a specific, that reports need to be in by a specific period of time, and that will make it easier for us to make sure that the working group is then given that information in a certain period of time. So it's difficult to say right this second what that's going to look like, but hopefully by the time we are getting to the 2026 review, we'll know exactly what that looks like, and we'll be able to plot that out for what this looks like moving forward. And that can be sort of a regular cadence. Again, the goal is always to try to develop this regular cadence, not just for us, but for you also, when you're voting on things and when certain items are expected.
and it would be it is our plan currently that we would do this around the same time frame every year. So assuming this gets out relatively soon, we should be able to pretty closely match this time frame that we're talking about, which is shortly before we generally do the annual review process. So for what that's worth.
Is that something that everyone's comfortable with?
No, Alana, this is Abby. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
So first of all, Amy, appreciate you kind of, asking when we might see this. I think it is helpful to have some kind of shared expectation around what we would be looking at and when. And I would just say that, ideally, obviously, we would have the whole thing ready to go, fully prepared and packaged and, dashboard, all of that. But if that is not possible, which, understand that it could not be, I would love some kind of update or context or where things are at, or even specifically what, how NYSERDA's numbers are looking, or DEC's numbers, even if all the agencies aren't prepared to report before we, move into our next process.
So even if we don't have everything wrapped up in a package, you would like basically what's available?
What's available would be so much better than nothing. Thank you for that. And one tiny other little thing, just this is different, but were we going to vote on December's minutes today? Do you still have that on the plan for today, Alana, or did that just get?
That just got tossed out the window. We can definitely vote on December's minutes. Thank you for that reminder, Abby.
Sure.
Just to close the loop on this, I guess originally what I was thinking of was having a vote of the Climate Justice Working Group saying that basically putting us on notice that we are saying that this is important and we have an expectation of receiving this information in the most timely way possible, so that we can effectively deliberate on the criteria, just to get that into the record. That was kind of my intent.
I'll second that.
Okay. All right, Alana Kidel-Tucky, DEC, I support that. I'll say yes. I don't.
And Michael Duramio NYSERDA, I also support that.
Amy Klein, Capital Roots, vote in favor.
Neil Muscatello, DOH, I support that.
Elizabeth Firth, Department of Labor, I support.
Okay, Amber.
Amber Johnson, I support.
Abby.
Abby McHugh Griffa, Climate Solutions Accelerator, I would vote in favor of that.
Arif.
Yeah, I vote in favor, and I'll just add that I think it would be good for us to have some type of process document. Maybe we do already. Maybe it's a matter of fine tuning or adjusting it, where it's very explicitly laid out that this is our process and this is the sequence by which we make decisions, and this reporting or whatever data is available has to be part of that sequence, and so that it becomes a practice and not just like a thing that we want to prioritize that's built into the process. But yes, in favor.
Great. Well, process document is Oliver's favorite words, so we'll definitely work on that. Thanks, Arif. Julie.
I vote in favor. Thank you.
And Jill.
I vote in favor. Jill Hank. Thanks.
I didn't forget anybody this time, right? We got everyone? Okay, fantastic. All right, so.
Alana, I'm sorry, this is Julie again. Can I just raise a slightly?
That's right, you did have your hand up before, Julie,
Yeah,
please.
I didn't want to disrupt the conversation, but I did want to raise just a little bit of a different issue, which may or may not be appropriate to ask, but I'm concerned about Arif's question over particulate matter 2.5, are there available correlates? So I was just wondering, is it appropriate to ask DEC, and I'm going to ask some of my Cornell colleagues who work more in this area, or maybe at Loom, can we start looking for a different data set that we could use, just because particulate matter pollution is so important when it comes to EJ issues? I want to make sure that as we're thinking about what happens to federal data, that we do have some important fallbacks. And I know that was part of the discussion before, but that the particulate matter issue I just think is super important. So I was just wondering if I could make that recommendation. Nobody needs to vote on it at all, but I was just saying if we can kind of all think about what might be other good substitutes, that would be great.
We can absolutely, that's a great recommendation. I know that is something that we do talk about in-house in OEJ. And Oliver and I will definitely take that back, and Kiana, because Kiana's here too, take that back, have conversations with our partners, including our partners in Loom, and we will definitely look into it.
Thanks so much.
No, absolutely. And now the minutes. I don't know if it's necessary to skip back to the minute slide.
I have a suggestion for edits in the minutes if you want me to make the motion.
Yep, please make the suggestion.
I make the motion to approve the minutes with the edit. I think it's on the second page. It says that I said here at the Department of Labor, but that was surely Elizabeth and not me. So there's just one quote that should be corrected. But with that addition, I make a motion to approve the minutes from December.
We'll definitely make sure that edit is made. Okay. All right, would anybody like to motion? You made the motion. I second the motion. I'm in favor of moving the minutes and approving those. Alana Kidel-Tucky. Let's just say it. Let's not say who. Let's just do it. Go. I'm in favor.
I just have a question. Sorry. I had made a request. I think there was some corrections. Is that already factored in?
I believe those were already factored,
Okay.
the ones that you set, but we will definitely go back through and make sure that before those are posted to the website, that those corrections are made.
Okay, perfect. And with that in mind, I approve.
Yes.
I think I was absent. I can't remember.
You can abstain.
Yeah, I'll abstain.
Okay.
Elizabeth Firth, I am saying this. I do approve. And thank you for that edit. I forgot about it.
Thank you. Moving on, Amber.
I approve.
And Arif?
Approve.
And Julie, I know that you were absent, so I didn't know if you were going to abstain.
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't here. Thanks, Alana.
And Jill?
I made the motion, but I think it's
The
Abby.
motion. Ignore me. You made the motion. It's late. All right. With that, we have approved the minutes with edits to remove or amend any inaccurate or wrongly stated information. Those minutes, once they have been amended, will be posted on the climate.ny.gov website along with the presentation and the recording of this meeting. All right, so moving forward, next steps, we will be reaching out with some just additional polling information to get an idea of when folks would like to meet next, and obviously to attend to some of those housekeeping details that are outside of the CLCPA. We'll also be keeping working group members updated on movement with any of the sort of state initiatives, including the release of the DAC maps and the guidance for the benefits and investments. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns before we close things out today? All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll hopefully speak again soon. If anybody has any questions, comments, and concerns that they didn't want to express here, feel free to reach out to me offline. Thanks again for anybody who joined us today. If you have any questions on the Climate Justice Working Group or the DAC criteria, please send those to climatejusticewg@dec.ny.gov. Press questions would go to press office at dec.ny.gov, and any general Office of Environmental Justice questions go to justice@dec.ny.gov. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you again at our next meeting. Take care.
Thank you all.